Behind the acts perpetrated by the deck of cards killer, there appeared to be a mysterious and adept figure, akin to Professor Moriarty. The elusive criminal seemed to slip through the grasp of law enforcement like a phantom. However, as is frequently the case in life, the reality unfolded to be far more surprising. The unfortunate boy. Alfredo Galan Sotillo came into the world on April 5, 1978, in the Spanish city of Puerto Llano, the youngest among 5 siblings. While excelling academically, his self-centered nature hindered him from forming friendships, leaving his mother as his sole companion. Tragically, his mother's guidance was cut short when she passed away suddenly when Alfredo was just 10 years old, intensifying his sense of isolation. In elementary school, he was described by peers as a reserved yet proud boy. Paradoxically, during high school, a transformative shift occurred. Alfredo joined the theater club, delving into clowning and acting. Almost magically, he metamorphosed into a jovial and spirited young man. Gradually, he endeared himself to others, culminating in his election as head boy in the final year of high school. Despite the external transformation, the internal void and insecurity lingered. Post-graduation, grappling with depression, Alfredo turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism. Army. Exuding cheerfulness in public, but harboring a somber demeanor in private, 20-year-old Alfredo enlisted in the Army in 1998. Dispatched to Bosnia and Herzegovina as part of an international peacekeeping contingent, he found himself in a country still grappling with the aftermath of a devastating civil war, with sporadic fighting persisting. Officially assigned non-intervention duties, Galan and his fellow soldiers were tasked with aiding refugees, participating in infrastructure repair, and safeguarding civilians. However, amid this mission, the young man bore witness to numerous harrowing scenes, leading to a growing fascination with weaponry. Post-service, he developed an obsession, amassing a collection of trophy guns that he indulged in shooting for recreational purposes. Upon returning to Spain, Alfredo brought his entire arsenal, including his favored semi-automatic pistol, the Tolsky Tokarev, commonly known as the TT, along with a substantial stockpile of ammunition. Boredom. In November 2002, while still on active duty, Alfredo was dispatched to the Galician coast, marred by the extensive oil spill from the massive tanker Prestige, an incident later marked as the largest environmental catastrophe in Spanish history. Displeased with what he deemed a boring job, Galan voiced his discontent. "I didn't join the army to clean up messes," he complained to a fellow soldier. To cope with his dissatisfaction, he turned to drinking, exacerbating tensions in his living arrangement with his siblings. During one heated argument, he impulsively pointed a gun at his older brother Jose, assuring him, "Don't worry, it's not loaded," before stowing the firearm. His erratic behavior continued in January 2003 when he clashed with an elderly woman. Seeking revenge, he stole her car and callously drowned her in a river. This act came to the attention of his commanding officer, who issued an ultimatum. Either Alfredo undergoes treatment for apparent post-traumatic stress disorder in a psychiatric hospital or resigns from military service. Diagnosis. Reluctantly, the young soldier complied with the directive to go to the hospital. There, the doctor diagnosed him with neurosis and depression, prescribing the necessary medication and permitting his return home with a condition that he adheres to the treatment plan and refrains from alcohol consumption. Regrettably, Alfredo disregarded the doctor's counsel, persisting in his alcohol abuse. Consequently, Galan was discharged from the army. Unwilling to part with the sense of superiority conferred by the uniform, he sought an alternative path by turning to the police. While he successfully navigated the psychological tests, he faltered in the fitness evaluation due to being overweight. This setback exacerbated his depression and alcoholism. Isolating himself within the confines of four walls, the former soldier began contemplating a sinister plan he had harbored for a considerable time: murder. The first victim. On January 24, 2003, Alfredo believed he was prepared. Armed and attired, he ventured onto the streets of Madrid with the intention of finding a victim. He lacked a specific preference. Galan was merely awaiting the opportune moment. Clad in a snug jacket, leather gloves, and sunglasses, he blended seamlessly with the crowd, evading suspicion as an ordinary passerby. Alfredo observed people entering and exiting buildings, going about their daily routines. Eventually, he singled out a 50-year-old man and trailed him to his apartment. When the man vanished behind the door, Galan knocked. Notably, before committing the crime, he compelled the victim to kneel. No evidence. Even though the police swiftly discovered the body, Galan harbored no apprehensions about being apprehended. He left no trace of his presence at the crime scene, providing no link between him and the victim. Law enforcement struggled with a lack of clues, leaving them without any leads to pursue in their quest to apprehend the killer. In the interim, the man avidly monitored media coverage of the case, meticulously collecting newspaper clippings. He reveled in his perceived cleverness, finding immense relief in the investigation veering off course, misled by the notion of a botched robbery. Come March 2003, Alfredo secured a position as a security guard at Madrid Barajas Airport. The prospect of donning a uniform again and wielding authority brought him great joy. Interestingly, Galan excelled in his duties, endearing himself to colleagues with his humor, chattiness, and love for laughter. However, upon leaving work and returning home, the man reverted to his sullen and unsociable demeanor. Ace of Cups. Before securing a job as a security guard, Alfredo committed several more murders. In the early hours of February 5, he skulked near a bus stop, targeting Juan Estacio, a victim he had no prior acquaintance with. This time, Alfredo left a distinctive calling card at the scene, the Ace of Cups. It's worth noting that Spanish playing cards, unlike the familiar suits, feature cups, swords, clubs, and coins. These cards are prevalent in Spain, southern Italy, and certain regions of France. This seemingly minor detail sparked a media frenzy, leading journalists to dub the perpetrator the Deck of Cards Killer. Alfredo Galan reveled in this recognition, feeling that his achievements were finally acknowledged and valued. He reveled in being somebody. Contrary to the significance Alfredo attached to the card, the police didn't give it much weight. Similar to the previous case, they leaned towards the theory of a botched robbery, but circumstances unfolded differently than anticipated. First description. A few days later, the card deck killer entered Rojas Bar in the city of Alcalá de Henares. Without uttering a word, he swiftly seized a gun and, after the abrupt act, Alfredo departed as if nothing had occurred. However, before leaving, he left 3 cup cards on the bar counter, one for the bar owner, another for a waiter, and the last for a customer named Juana Uckles. Unbeknownst to Alfredo, Juana miraculously survived the assault and managed to provide the police with a rudimentary description of the assailant. Armed with this information, law enforcement now possessed a sketch, seemingly poised to apprehend the perpetrator. Unfortunately, Uckles's description was so imprecise that the resulting portrait could feasibly match almost any man in the suburbs. On March 7, 2003, Alfredo, newly employed at the airport just days prior, took a stroll in the suburbs of Madrid. There, he encountered Santiago Salaza and his girlfriend Annie. Forcing them to kneel, he commenced the execution of his sinister plan, starting with the man. However, when Galan attempted the same with the woman, his gun jammed. Alfredo spared the terrified Annie, leaving her unharmed, and swiftly fled the crime scene, leaving behind a map. 6 weeks later, Galan ventured to the small village of Arganda del Rey outside Madrid. Again choosing a couple as his targets, this time the gun unfortunately misfired. Feeling a sense of impunity, Alfredo became less cautious. A witness observed his actions, providing a third description of the criminal. However, when the police compared the sketches, they found minimal resemblance among them, and none bore a likeness to Alfredo. Disclosure. On July 3, 2003, Alfredo, frustrated by the perceived ineffectiveness of the police, visited the police station in his hometown of Puertollano. Prior to this visit, he had consumed a significant amount of alcohol. Galan confessed to the officer that he was the elusive deck of cards killer, sought for the past 5 months. The police officer listened to his inebriated account, and then dismissed him with a request to sober up and refrain from bothering him with fictional tales. Surprisingly, the peculiar visitor returned the next day. This time, he was sober and reiterated his previous testimony, disclosing details only the killer could know. Notably, Alfredo handed the bewildered policeman a deck of cards bearing his distinctive signatures. Throughout the interaction, the man maintained a reserved and polite demeanor. Towards the end, he expressed dissatisfaction with the performance of Spanish law enforcement, asserting that they would never have caught him if he hadn't turned himself in. Politeness comes first. Seemingly eager to toy with the investigation, 2 months later, during the trial, Galan abruptly altered his testimony. He shifted all blame onto an imaginary criminal group, claiming they coerced him into confessing to crimes he had not committed by threatening to harm his sister. The implausible narrative found no credence among the authorities. Forensic psychiatrists deemed Galan mentally sound, but noted his pronounced narcissistic tendencies. His obsession with controlling others was evident in his treatment of victims. Interestingly, survivors testified that Alfredo unfailingly greeted his victims and courteously uttered pleas when instructing them to kneel. His rationale for this behavior was that politeness is the most important thing in life. Ultimately, the most polite serial killer was convicted of 6 murders and 3 attempted murders, receiving a 142-year prison sentence. In 2023, marking 20 years since his conviction, he became eligible for parole, albeit with slim chances of release. Yes, Galan was not initially on the radar when arrested. He presented himself publicly as childishly naive and open-minded, lacking the demeanor of a criminal. In reality, he played God. Perhaps, had he not turned himself in, we would have apprehended him sooner, confessed an anonymous police officer involved in the case. I hope you liked this story. Please don't forget to leave a comment sharing with your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up this video and remember to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more captivating stories. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey, and we'll see you in the next video.